Urgent. The Provincial Court of Madrid confirms that Begoña Gómez will be tried by a jury for crimes of influence peddling and embezzlement. Let's get started. Welcome to a new edition of Medidas Cautelares with Miguel Ángel Pérez. Pay close attention because we already have the ruling from Section 23 of the Provincial Court of Madrid. And no, neither Pedro Sánchez nor Begoña Gómez are going to like it at all. Why? Because the judges of the Provincial Court confirmed that Begoña Gómez will have to be tried by a jury for 2 of the 4 crimes for which she had been charged by Judge Peinado. Specifically for influence peddling and also for embezzlement. 2 very serious crimes. On the other hand, the good news is there's another part of the ruling we're going to like. The thing is, the Provincial Court of Madrid has lifted the restrictions imposed on Begoña Gómez and her advisor. That is, she will now be able to leave Spain, her passport will be returned to her, and so on. We have the ruling. Fresh out of the Provincial Court of Madrid, we're going to share it on screen as we always do. By the way, if you haven't done it yet, remember to subscribe to the Medidas Cautelares channel. Come on, one last push before August. And now we have, attention, this extremely important historic ruling from Section 23 of the Provincial Court of Madrid, which confirms that Begoña Gómez will have to be tried by a jury, the wife of the Prime Minister of Pedro Sánchez. It's a 63-page ruling and we're going to highlight 2 main excerpts that I think are the most important. Let's go from these 63 pages to page 52, which gives the summary, right? The judges make a summary of all the arguments and the decision they make. Here we are at point 10, says this ruling from the Provincial Court of Madrid. It is confirmed. The continuation of the jury proceedings against Begoña Gómez is ordered for the crimes of influence peddling and embezzlement of public funds. Revoking the continuation of the jury proceedings for the crime of business corruption and misappropriation. That is, business corruption and misappropriation are removed, okay? Begoña Gómez will be sent before a jury for influence peddling and embezzlement, which are 2 very serious crimes. It is also confirmed. The proceedings by jury will continue against his Moncloa advisor, Cristina Álvarez, for participating in the crime of embezzlement of public funds attributed to Begoña Gómez, but only in relation to the diversion of the software. The continuation of the proceedings under the jury law against the businessman Juan Carlos Barrabés is cancelled. They understand this without prejudice to the continuation of the investigation regarding Barrabés within the preliminary proceedings and, if necessary, in a separate case, given the existence of evidence that suggests he may have benefited from the public procurement process. The existence of evidence that suggests he may have benefited from public contracting and the awarding of certain contracts. This possible situation, the awarding of certain contracts, would, if applicable, be linked to the letters sent by Begoña Gómez within the framework of public contracting procedures. That is to say, for now, Juan Carlos Barrabés is spared from the continuation of the jury proceedings, but this does not mean that the case against him will be closed, as it will continue. Before addressing the issue of precautionary measures, I also appreciate the reflection made by the judges of the Provincial Court. Moncloa advisor Cristina Álvarez, the crime of embezzlement of public funds, and the Supreme Court's ruling in the Coldo case, which anti-corruption chief prosecutor Alejandro Luzón also mentioned. The judges of the Provincial Court say, before concluding, we cannot fail to mention the important and recent Supreme Court ruling of June 22nd, which addresses jury trials in corruption cases as a preliminary issue. And it highlights how, from a traditional perspective, corruption was understood as diversion or misuse for private benefit. Desde una visión tradicional, nowadays there is a tendency to talk about corruption in a broader sense. Proceedings. Model law of organization established for the management of matters with financial implications, whose basis is sworn patrimonial. Its foundation lies in the violation of a duty to act according to the model designed by the legal system. Because whoever becomes corrupt breaks the rules of their position. It lies in violating a duty to act inherent in the model established by the legal system. Because whoever strays from the rules of their position, whether in preliminary proceedings or through deviation, remember that the Supreme Court tells us that this perspective allows us to understand corruption not only as an economic offense, but also as a phenomenon that affects the integrity of organizations, both public and private, and trust in their functioning. Its seriousness lies in the fact that it erodes the foundations of the democratic state by distorting the purpose of public power and turning it into an instrument serving private interests. Taking up this reflection from the Supreme Court, the Provincial Court says that, as a result, it has an expansive scope that goes beyond its economic harm or the violation of duties by public servants. Its most serious effect is the deterioration of citizens' trust in the political system, as it breaks the expectation that democratic power is exercised for the benefit of all citizens. A society that perceives that those who hold positions of power act guided by private interests or interests unrelated to public service in order to obtain a benefit experiences a loss of institutional legitimacy that compromises the stability of the system itself. I, of course, fully agree with these statements from the Provincial Court of Madrid, recalling what the Supreme Court said in its ruling on the Coldo case. And now, we move on to the part that, of course, will also bring controversy. And that is that the judges of the Provincial Court of Madrid consider that the precautionary measures imposed by Judge Penado on Begoña Gómez and her advisor at Moncloa are not justified. They set them aside. The precautionary measures imposed on Begoña Gómez are lifted. The judges say that, even without questioning the evidentiary assessment made in the appeal decision, it cannot be said that there is a real and effective risk of flight with the required intensity to justify maintaining the agreed measures. The ruling essentially bases this risk on the seriousness of the crimes under investigation and on the statutory sentencing range for them. By considering that the possible imposition of prison sentences could be a circumstance that increases the risk of evading justice. However, this element, although relevant, cannot by itself serve as sufficient grounds and must be weighed together with the other personal and objective circumstances present in the case. And bearing in mind that, although this court has found reasonable indications of criminal conduct, it has modified the determination of punishable acts, as well as the identification of the persons who are ultimately charged. Therefore, the factual and legal basis on which the investigating judge relied has changed from what it was at the time when the precautionary measures were adopted. However, the judges state that it is clear the investigated individuals have appeared at all judicial summonses issued to them, and there is no evidence to suggest any attempt to evade or obstruct justice. They also have personal, family, and professional ties in the country. This, according to case law, is a relevant factor when assessing the risk of flight. On the other hand, the reasoning provided in the appeal decision by Judge Penado regarding the persistence of this risk is not sufficiently individualized nor supported by concrete data that would allow for the conclusion of a real probability of flight, relying to a large extent on considerations that are not sufficient to support the adoption of measures that are so restrictive of fundamental rights. Even if some risk is present, it's necessary to analyze whether the adopted measures meet the proportionality test required for their adoption. In this regard, the measures of ban on leaving the country, surrender of the passport, and regular reporting requirements directly affect the right to free movement recognized in Article 19 of the Constitution. In particular, the judges state that these measures are not strictly necessary. To the extent that the purpose of ensuring that the investigated individuals remain subject to the proceedings can be sufficiently achieved by imposing less burdensome measures, they should be required to remain available to the court at all times, with the corresponding obligation to report any change of address or whereabouts. In this regard, it is not sufficiently clear that the severity of the measures taken is proportionately justified, in the circumstances of the case and at the prevailing level of risk. Given the principle of subsidiarity that must guide the adoption of personal precautionary measures, conclusion: the Provincial Court of Madrid overturns the precautionary measures imposed by Judge Penado. It says, also in this 63-page ruling, each side will bear its own legal costs. notify the parties of this resolution, making it known that it is final and no appeal is possible against it, and return the proceedings to the originating court for any appropriate action. And this is the latest information. The Provincial Court of Madrid confirms that the wife of the President of the government, Pedro Sanchez, Begoña Gómez, will have to stand trial before a lay jury for the crimes of influence peddling and embezzlement. The judges of the Provincial Court of Madrid also confirmed that her advisor at the Prime Minister's office, Cristina Álvarez, should be tried in the same way for the crime of embezzlement. And for the moment, businessman Juan Carlos Barrabés will not be brought to trial, although he is still under investigation in the case. Finally, the judges also agreed to lift all the precautionary measures that Judge Peinado had imposed on Begoña Gómez and her advisor, Cristina Álvarez. Therefore, Begoña Gómez will now have her passport and will be able to leave Spain to go on vacation or go wherever she wants. And this is the latest update we're bringing you, and of course any new developments on this matter you'll always get firsthand here on Precautionary Measures with Miguel Angel Perez. That's all for now. This edition of Precautionary Measures with Miguel Angel Perez. I hope you enjoyed the video, the information, and of course leave me your comments and opinions. What do you think about the decision of the Provincial Court of Madrid? Some good and some bad news. Begoña Gómez will be tried by a lay jury for influence peddling and embezzlement, but the Provincial Court of Madrid has lifted the precautionary measures Judge Peinado imposed on her. What do you think? Leave me your opinions, and you already know that you can become members like the chosen ones for less than €4 a month, or like the supreme ones for less than €8 a month. You can also make contributions via Bizum at 627-5555-6370, 627-5555-6370. I already told you that I'm working on improvements, on new things for the next season, which are also very important, and every season we have to keep coming up with new things, right? To create excitement in this community. Thank you all for your attention. As I always say, the most important thing is that this information reaches everyone because information is powerful. See you soon.